respect. This is Cassandra. Are you in a safe place to talk?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So tell me what's going on.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not really sure. Even though I've called before, I'm still not entirely familiar with your criteria. But, I still just had some questions in regards to some information I hope you guys might have. And this would be about a battered woman's syndrome or, battered man's syndrome. I know it could apply both ways. But, yeah, I was just like hearing about that condition, and I was wondering if you might have like more information about it and how it can like kind of influence a victim's decisions while they're like trapped in the cycle of domestic violence. And the reason I'm basically asking, the reason I'm asking is just because, it's kind of like a long story, but like I was just hearing like this other story about another girl who was in a situation with her batterer, but she was a parent, and she's like just getting more criticism than the actual perpetrator, because like she eventually was sent to prison, even though it doesn't look like she was abusing the little girl too. But she was also like a victim. But for whatever reason, like she was like denied an assessment on battered woman's syndrome and like just sent to prison with the abuser anyway. So yeah, I was just curious if you might like have some information about that. Yeah.
So, I don't believe that there is any one definition for what they call battered women's syndrome, and we don't find that really helpful because the reasons why people stay in abusive relationships, the reasons why people hold on to relationships, even if perhaps they might have a way out by what people from the outside can see, are very, very complicated.
Right.
People can hold on because they, very often because the abuser is telling them that everything is their fault and that since everything is your fault, you can fix it as well. So they think they have a combination of beliefs that they somehow deserve this, but also if they could be a better person or if they could do this different or that not so much, then the other person will stop abusing them. So there are just lots of false beliefs,
right,
which abusers really encourage. They encourage you to believe that it's your fault and that you're bringing it on yourself. People hold on to abusive relationships sometimes because they're really afraid of being alone.
Right.
Because they were just predisposed that way by how they were raised or their temperament or whatever.
Right.
Sometimes people, they, or very often, the relationship starts off so wonderfully or seems to be so wonderful.
Right.
And then the wonderful part goes away and you just can't let go of it. You keep wanting to have that back, and people may say, well, that was never really real. He was always an abuser. He was just putting on an act. That's true, but emotionally there's a part of you that can't let go.
Right.
So it can get enormously complicated, and when people call here talking about their situation, or sometimes if it's a family member or friend in the situation, we ask questions and we try and get some idea of why they're stuck. Some people, pride is a big, they don't want to admit that they're being abused. They don't want to admit that this is the situation they're in, and so they really resist it. And they believe this can somehow be managed. So again, it's there are all kinds of factors, and just putting a blanket term like battered women syndrome
Right.
really isn't helpful most of the time.
Right. Okay. I see. Yeah. And I agree. The thing is, though, in this particular situation that I was addressing, most people don't have sympathy for the victim. And I'm not saying I'm agreeing with these people, but I'm just trying to, I don't know if you can give me a different perspective or not, but like most people just don't have any sympathy for her because, as I mentioned, a child was involved. And even though like she was being abused, like just people are just like kind of, well, there was like, there's just some things that people are saying that just feels like a little like disturbing to me. Like, for example, I've been hearing people say stuff like, well, if that was me, I would die for my child. And I don't really like hearing things like that. I don't know if you agree or not, but it just makes me feel really uncomfortable. That like when people, like, why would they impose death on someone who is being abused? I'm not saying that she shouldn't do anything to try to protect her child, even, if she is a victim too, but I'm just like kind of concerned about how much more of the emphasis is on the victim leaving and protecting her child than on the actual abuser not being abusive in the first place. I'm just, yeah.
Well, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
It is very strange when you step back and look at it. How quick people are to judge the abuse victim.
Right,
and how many excuses people make for the actual abuser.
Right.
Like, well, he was drunk, or he had a bad childhood, or this or that. And, the victim is just supposed to be, she's supposed to know what's going on right off. She's supposed to get out, regardless of her emotions, or regardless of whether there's any practical way for her to get out. And people just, people are very judgmental.
Yeah.
And part of that, I'm sure, is sexism. It's just women are held responsible for relationships. Women are held responsible for children in a way that men are not. And it's, part of it, I think, is fear. When you hear about someone in a domestic violence relationship, it's like you hear about someone who's had a heart attack or gotten cancer. Your first thought goes to, well, that couldn't happen to me because I'm this person. I'm this person who jogs or doesn't eat hot dogs or whatever. So your mind immediately goes to trying to make yourself feel safe.
Right.
And when you hear about a domestic violence victim, it is much easier to believe that, well, they're just stupid, they're weak-willed, they're uneducated, they got into this situation for all these reasons that would never apply to me.
Okay.
This can really happen to anyone.
Right. I agree.
Some of us are more vulnerable than others, but there are just lots of abusers out there. They're very skilled at what they do. And anyone can fall into a very bad situation with another person.
Yeah. The thing is, like, most people, well, the people who are like criticizing the mother, they think that her situation is more exceptional because, well, I'm sorry, I don't remember if I mentioned this or not, but the little girl actually passed away from the abuse that the abuser inflicted on her. And like in the opinion of the majority of people, it seems like the mother did have numerous opportunities to leave, and for whatever reason, like she just didn't take those opportunities. And yeah, I don't really know the whole story, but as I mentioned, the mom went to prison with the perpetrator. Yeah, so they just think that because like in the situation of a parent, like most people just don't have any empathy. Like they don't really care about whatever the victim is going through. Like they think they're just no excuse. You know what I'm saying? Like they, yeah.
And you hear about a child dying that is very, very painful to hear about, and one way to one way that people respond to that is by wanting someone else to suffer. It's kind of emotionally satisfying to think, well, she allowed this to happen, so she's going to suffer for it now, and it's just an easy response.
Yeah.
What it really all boils down to, and this is true not just with domestic violence, but with anything in life, is that everyone has, there's always reasons for why people are doing things. It doesn't mean there's an excuse for it. People still make choices, but there's always reasons. And people do not just decide, I want to go be in an abusive relationship and go through all that. I want to, I want to do anything at all. That's very painful and unpleasant. And it's just a lot more helpful, certainly with us here, but I think with life in general, it's a lot more helpful to be curious about why people are making the choices they make rather than to judge them.
Right.
And of course, if someone commits a crime or does something terrible or someone really fails in their duty towards their children, then punishment may be appropriate. And that's a judgment call. But as far as abusive relationships, there are reasons that people get stuck.
Yeah.
And that these things happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate you telling me all this, because I'm a survivor myself, and I know myself how hard it is, to get out of a situation like that. I almost did die, getting out, and actually I lost a baby in the process of leaving. And there's, just so many people, and I think that's just one of the reasons I get triggered. Because I know that, as I mentioned, it just looks like most people are just kind of really just ragging on the mom in this situation, because they are just saying, oh, she could have left or she should have left. I'm just sort of letting that go. People have a right to their opinion, so I'm just not even going to try to argue with them anymore. But but just...
Did you ever have that experience of being judged by other people?
Oh yeah, I get victim shamed all the time, honestly. Just I get it. Believe me, it's the worst feeling in the world.
Very, very painful.
Oh yeah.
Nobody else has walked in your shoes.
Yeah.
Nobody else knows what you had to deal with. My experience generally with the people we talk to on this hotline, and I'm sure most people who don't call this hotline, is that people are doing the best they can.
Right.
In any given situation. But again, for all of these reasons, people just like to judge. It is maybe one of the worst parts of being a human being, and it's something that we're all very prone to.
Oh yeah.
But you do not need to be taking that from anyone.
Yeah. And I understand that. I think it's just really weird because, even though I know that these are mostly just ordinary everyday people who just don't understand, saying these things. But believe it or not, sometimes I even see so-called professionals who claim to have worked with domestic abuse victims saying stuff like that too. Yeah, I'm not kidding. For example, just from the top of my head, I've heard someone say, "Oh, it wasn't fear, keeping her there. It was drugs and and stuff like that." And I don't know. I just don't. What's the? What difference does it make? That's just how I see it. He shouldn't be abusing this woman and her child regardless, Yeah.
And you're right that even lots of mental health professionals are very bad with these things.
Oh, yeah. And I know for myself how overpowering addiction can be. At least from what I understand of it, that actually can be a coping mechanism some victims have. And
it's a very common coping
yes,
mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You're going through overwhelming pain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, again, you're doing the best you can with it.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've forgiven yourself?
Oh, I don't know. That's kind of complicated. I mean, I've always seen like forgiveness as kind of overrated, to be honest. Like I mean, I've just kind of, accepted, that I did the best I could with the knowledge I had at the time, and I don't think it's something that I could like just per se just kind of get over, but I can like kind of learn how to cope with what happened, if that makes sense, and just and yeah. And
Yeah, and what I mean by forgiveness, just to be clear, forgiving yourself, it is, understanding is a huge part of it. Understanding that, well, I was in a different place and I made all these choices, and I was doing the best that I can.
Yeah.
Not judging yourself for it anymore, and not feeling that, well, if like thinking if I knew then what I know now, I should have known then what I know now, which is just not possible. If you would have done something different, then everything would have worked out great. And of course, that may be true in some ways, but
right.
Again, if you're doing the best you can, then you are doing the best you can.
Right.
And so it's letting go of judgment, and there's still the loss of your child. However that happened, there's still everything that you had to go through.
Right.
And you don't necessarily get over it completely during your lifetime. But you cannot torment yourself, definitely.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of people do torment themselves over these things.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. And one thing I'm kind of hoping to eventually see is like if just people just could, just leave this girl alone. The one that I mentioned, the one who's going through that. And, even though she's in prison, and even if they think that it's justified that she's in there, because of, whatever. The court was saying, like, I mean, I still have empathy for her, and even though it looks like I'm like amongst like a very small percentage of people, who is not blaming her, like I feel what I feel. I do respect the rights of others to disagree with me, but I just don't think it's fair that she's in prison, with, her abusive boyfriend. Something about that just, there's just a lot of things about it. Of course, I know we don't have enough time to really talk about everything, but at first it looked like she was actually going to get more time than, her boyfriend before her sentence was reduced, to being less than what he was getting. And that felt weird to me. Like, I was like, what the heck? That's just, yeah.
But these things absolutely happen.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
And, women clearly kill their abuser in self-defense, and they get sentenced as if they were an abuser. So there's a lot of injustice in these situations.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of abused mothers in prison. It just looks like the system is not balanced, and it's just sad. But but okay. But yeah, I really thank you for sharing this information. This is just so helpful, and it's very validating. So yeah, I just really appreciate it. And yeah, I think that's all I will need from you right now. But yeah, I guess, I don't know why there are terms like battered women's or battered men's syndrome. I was just like, yeah.
It's kind of an old-fashioned term, I think.
Yeah.
And it was mostly men who were, scratching their chins and thinking, why are these women so irrational? They weren't masculine. They weren't finding out what was actually going on. And so they just came up with this term which just suggests, well, basically they're crazy. That's why they're staying.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard of that. That's a common stereotype too. Like yeah, unfortunately, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So, you've been great. So, yeah, I really thank you so much. And